We have our esteemed panel. All of them have been involved with summer learning in other contexts, and all have been partners in the Boston Summer Learning Project. You'll see their biographies in your folder, but allow me just to do a brief introduction. You've met Jennifer. Melissa Partridge, who now is the Director of Transformation Strategy and Compliance at the Office of, at the Boston Public Schools, has been with this project since 2011, and she's been a key partner, as Ron alluded to, on the assessments, but on a whole bunch of other fronts, curriculum, teacher hiring, and getting this whole thing off the ground way back when. Kristin McSwain is Executive Director of the Boston Opportunity Agenda, which is Boston's Cradle to Career agenda. It's a collective impact agenda, and she's been a key player in this from the beginning as well. And finally, Eric Arnold, Executive Director of Hale Reservation, great outdoor learning environment, and he's been a partner in this approach since 2011. So all of them have been here since before the study, actually, and have continued through it. So I just want to throw a question out there and get everyone rolling. Eric, we'll start with you on the end. What do you take from the study?
It's pretty. Am I supposed to use this?
Yeah, you can use that.
Is this working? How's that?
There you are.
Great. Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here and to see everybody. It's a fun day to be really looking at these results. And I've heard Jen speak about this a few times. Every time I do, I gain a little bit more from that experience. But I think there's a variety of exciting components that influence all of our work in the city that come from this study to date. I think one thing that stands out to me is that we are proving that we can really move the needle, and it is great to have a third-party evaluator helping us identify that. Those of us who have been sort of doing this work for a long time, we believe our impact is there. We feel strongly that we're making a huge difference in the lives of children, but now to have this data behind it is really important. So how we use that is also a really key thing. And I think that this study and the work that we've been doing has also really allowed us to become a community of learners. The network of organizations that have been working with RAND, with NIOS, and looking at this data and thinking about how do we improve programs from there. It's given us an opportunity to work together, to look for best practices, to look at things that are going to influence the way we provide programs to students and how we can do that. And to be open-minded about feedback is really important. And to have that happen with a partner that I don't know how many years back I looked, but I wasn't aware that BPS was as open to being a partner as they are, and they are so open to us working with them to help fulfill the needs. It really is taking on the mindset, and we've heard it said many times, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. The village is bigger than just BPS, and they're willing to look outside and say there are community-based organizations that are strong, that have good resources, have ways to implement education programs that can really enrich a child's life. And I think that's really important to have that partnership that is key to making this whole thing work out. And I think another piece that to me that stands out about this, and Jen highlighted this a little while ago when she was talking about the results, and in particular, even when Arthur asked his question about the social emotional growth, being intentional about what we do is how we move the needle, and that's really, really important. And how we take results of information and data back to be intentional with that information and use that in our training, even as early as in our hiring, in our training, in our orientation with students, and how we design programs, and looking at every minute of every day and how important that is for students. And because we don't have a lot of time in the summer, it's a short window. And for us to move the needle, we need to take every minute and use that very key design of programs that we're using that time really, really well. I think those are sort of the overall takeaways that I have at this point from that. I think that this has been a great opportunity for us as a community-based organization to get some invaluable feedback, be part of a great partnership, and work to to really help move the needle on some exciting things that we can influence.
Thanks. Kristin, I'll pose the same question to you. What do you make of this initial round of findings?
Sure. So I think there are a couple of things that jump out to me from having heard the presentation a number of times too. And each time I sort of pick up something new and think about it a little differently. So stick with me, and in 6 weeks this might be a different answer. But I think that one of the things that Eric said is really true is around the intentionality. And using data and evaluation as part of continuous improvement for programming. I think that is one of the things that's very clear, because over time, as we did year over year, the first 2 years of the study were sort of practice. We got feedback from Rand and made some changes, and I think saw some results because of that and because of that intentionality. So that is key to me. I think the second thing that's really key, though, is to remember that it is only 5 weeks, which sounds like a really long time until you translate it to that is 25 days. And in the life of a young person, that's not very long. And so really managing our expectations about what's realistic to be able to do in 5 weeks. So in some ways, the fact that someone came in and didn't see huge changes in their reading, when you sit back and reflect on it, in 25 days, maybe that's not so astounding, right? I appreciate the research, but maybe that's not so astounding, right? But what we can do is look at what the underlying factors are that contribute to making things improve. So the pieces around the kinds of teacher, the pieces around the type of time. I think there's a whole lot of potential in there, but I also think there's a lot of potential in sort of saying maybe summer reading is actually just a time to have a love of reading that then connects to the school year. And so the piece for me that we need to really think about is not only what can we do in summer and managing the expectations around that, and I think we don't know enough to even do what I just said, so don't go and do that, but let's stay tuned, is to really think about how it connects to the school year, and that for me is part of this whole year learning cycle for young people that we've been talking about, that I think these findings really move forward. And then the third thing for me that they really highlight is the need for all of us to be doing this together, because we each have different program design models, and I think most of us want to continue to do that. But how do you do that and also be working together to focus on the kinds of outcomes we want to see for kids in 25 days, and how those connect to the school year? So those are sort of the three highlights that from my perspective, when I think about the outcomes that we've seen so far, are the things I want to continue to be focused on.
And Melissa, share your perspective from the district perspective. What do you make of these initial findings? We have another mic here.
We're sharing, we're collaborating. This experience has been such a tremendous learning for the district on so many different levels. Being a part of the RAND study and working with Jen and her team, the first 2 years we got formative feedback, and it was the best coaching and advice. We have a lot of consultants running through BPS, and I have to say Rand is probably the best we've ever had, although you were an accidental consultant, I guess. But just to, echo what John McDonough said is, we've been working so hard to make expanded learning truly real, and not by older definitions of adding time to the school day or doing this. This is truly trying to build a continuous system of learning. So taking every available minute for a child and make it engaging and something that they can learn and grow from. And these early findings give us some evidence that we're onto something, and all of our efforts are actually working out, which is tremendous. From the academic data, that is a story that will continue to unfold, and I think we've had to learn patience in this. It's not going to be a silver bullet. We're not going to find something out right away. To echo what Kristin said, it's 25 days. So I think what we're trying to focus on, and the academic data will continue to guide us, is what is realistic in 25 days that can make impact for students. And that is something we're trying to crack the code on from the academic side of the house. I think more interesting to us right now at this moment, because we're trying to be patient, is the formative feedback we got early in the study, but now the correlational findings are really interesting to us, and we can start to fold that into program development and program planning. The daily attendance rate for us, I think, was a smashing success. It felt like it was 100% to us. And I think that flags that this program, or we want summer programming to be so engaging and so interesting to students that they will come. I always say, definition of insanity. In summer, we would give kids the same thing they got in the school year. So let's bring kids back to the same old hot classrooms and give them more of the same and expect them to be super excited and show up every day. Not happening. So it's because of every partner in this room that students show up because they're getting something so different that they don't get in their normal lives. And that's very exciting. So how do we build that into the school year? So that's a finding. Out of the correlational, of course, it's, intuitive. Quality instruction matters. How you organize the day matters. Social, emotional, in Boston we should be so proud. We've actually made that an equal part to the academics. We've made enrichment, although I hate the word enrichment, I think it's more experience. We've made that just as important, so we kind of have these 3 pillars of summer programming of what matters. And how do we carry that into the school year? So I think as the findings unfold, and again, I say we have to have patience, because the story will continue to tell us things. It may tell us things we don't want to see, that we're not having an impact in ELA, or this is not happening. So what does that mean? And then we're going to have to make action from that. So I think the last thing I'll say is, we are having sources of data and information that we didn't have before. Now it's up to us in the district to use it to make really good, informed decisions, and that's really where we're at.
Great, thank you. So it's interesting, each of you mentioned, we have these great results, and each of you mentioned some element of the process that was helpful. Eric talked about BPS as being open to partnerships and new kinds of partnerships. Kristin talked about the value in working together, sharing data. Melissa talked about informing a year-round expanded learning strategy, not just a 5-week program. I want to ask Jen, what do you make of this process, and can we get any better?
So I have to say that of all the districts, so we've been working with these 5 districts for going on 5 years now, and I have to say that Boston stands out as the district that's made sort of the largest year-on-year improvements. In terms of its programming and the quality, and has done the most to think systematically about summer as part of the school year experience, as part of what communities can bring to the table, and thinking about how to create experiences for students, and then how to use data to feed back into that system. And that is, that probably is one of the most remarkable things for me in terms of sort of Boston and what's unique about this city.
Eric, I want to dig in a little deeper. You talked about BPS as a partner. And you've always run great enrichment programs at Hale, everyone knows that, people pay money to do them. How has this sort of collaboration enhanced what you've been doing?
That's a good question. I think, when I think back to whatever it was 4 or 5 years ago when we began this process, and we were looking at the collaborative part with BPS and talking about integrating academics, which we believe academics are happening while we're doing it, and we had always had the philosophy that we were doing it in sort of this osmosis sort of way, organic. And I think coming back, early feedback for us was, you're not intentional enough about your academics, and therefore you're not going to quite hit the marks that you want to. That osmosis method isn't going to quite work as well as you might think. And I think, so for us, the ability to have the partnership and the feedback, and to be able to then link a lot more of what we're doing much more specifically with curriculum components of BPS, has been able to put forth goals, specific goals, and have some very standardized components that we're able to focus on, have really helped, and they really help us with that sort of key partnership side of things. And overall, that helps us as an organization, grows our capacity and our ability to sort of to do the same type of work beyond just this small summer program that we've been a part of, but how do we integrate that in other components of what we're doing at Hale? I don't know if I hit your question.
Yeah. Well, let me ask Melissa to represent the other side of the coin. What is it like as the district to partner with Hale and so many other organizations? What's the advantage for the district?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's wonderful. I think I always talk to people as we go to, a part of the study with the other districts is we convene together and we talk, and the envy of other districts of how many partners we have in this wealth of resource and CBOs we have, it's not lost on us. We get reminded every time we go to one of these convenings. I won't lie, in the beginning it was messy. I think that CBOs had some, much understood frustration of how do you break through this bureaucracy and system and actually gain meaningful relationships, and what are the principals that actually call you back because I want to go, campaign them to work with my CBO, and how does this all work? And I think we had to, as a district, we can't just expect good things to come out of CBOs and for you to partner with us and do all the work. We had to create a really structured access point for you to engage with us and us to be good partners in return. So I think through this summer learning project, we've learned how we need to be good partners. I'll say a great offshoot of that is, in the district, we were running our own proprietary summer programming, a very large offering. And it was run in BPS schools, by BPS teachers, by BPS administrators, and it was not impressive whatsoever. And Summer Learning Project taught us how to be impressive by incorporating really good partners. And so we made a shift to take on a major partner to take over our largest summer programming, which was Bell. So working with partners has had such a footprint and such an impact on us to the point that we've completely redesigned summer to be majority partnership with CBOs. So I think that's been a tremendous experience for us.
Can I just want to piggyback on one of the things that you were just saying there too. I think that from our vantage point, watching the district as well become more and more tuned in with the importance of social emotional. It's clearly something that teachers know, districts know that that's important, but I think having had the opportunity for so many teachers to go to locations around the city and watch a program really focus on social emotional. It was highlighted earlier, but we're this far away from statistically showing that we're moving the needle on social emotional growth, which across with other cities, that wasn't the case. So we know when we do that, we can make a difference in how kids feel about themselves, the experience that they have, how they feel about learning, how they interact with their peers, how they make friends and all that. And I think working with the district and the district acknowledging that component as being so important for youth development has been a great process as well. So sort of, I don't know that, it's as Melissa talks about what they're learning, I think that's something that I've watched that evolve as time's going on.
Teachers feel really strong about the experiences that both their kids had, but they had, and the new kinds of professional relationships that they developed and the tools that they developed. So that was really encouraging. So I'm hearing from Melissa and Eric this set of two-way expectations, collaboration, accountability. Is this collective impact, Kristin?
So I think if you put about 20 more people up here, yes. I think that's one of the things that I would say has been the most important part of this process. The outcomes that they both just talked about don't happen when you have one partner partnering with one school or with the district. They happen when a lot of different people are at the table, bringing their best thinking, their best resources, and some of their challenges that need to be solved, and need to be solved across the district, across program. And that really is the piece of collective impact that we've seen happen, as well as the focus on data. But I think, harking back to Ron Dorsey's comments this morning, I know that vertical alignment of assessments is not terribly sexy, but that's an important piece of the work. It's an important piece of understanding what's happening with young people, and that never would have happened if one program went to the district and said, hey, would you do this? It's too time intensive, it's too costly, there's not enough feedback from different participants, whether it's the district side or the community side, to really have an understanding of why that would be important, what we need to learn, and when we made a few misses, which we inevitably did, the there was a lot of misses the first couple of years. Being able to sit down and talk through what we learned, what worked, what didn't work, how we could make it better. All of that is a piece of the collective impact. And I think more importantly, when we talk about individual programs, I have 3 young people. Those programs are only as good as my ability to get my young person in them, right? Which is the same for every other kid. But if we take a step back and look at the system of providers, at the system of schools, and think about it at that level, the changes are more likely to have an impact in all students, because all students will have access, than whether or not my kid or your kid happens to be lucky enough to get into the summer program at Hale. And so I think that is also the piece of collective impact, which is it's not about individual programs. It's really about building a system of summer programming and other things that work, which is why, and we haven't really talked about it much this morning, why having additional partners join in the evaluation pieces, to me, has been really important, because we obviously don't have enough money to fund every single summer program. You all have different streams of funding. But if we want to be able to talk about what we're doing together, we need to be using the same language. We need to be thinking about the outcomes we're looking for young people in the same ways, and using our data conversations to move things forward. And you can't do that if you're using one assessment and they're using something different, and this group isn't even thinking about social and emotional because they haven't gotten to it yet. So that is also the piece of this work, and the collective impact piece of this work that I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. And Melissa, play off that. I saw you nodding. So more programs speaking the same language. Is the BPOs open for more business in this sense, and how so?
Absolutely, and I think, I don't know, is John Sproul's not here. Anyway, he's Director of Partnerships and Development for the district, and he's done a lot of deep work on alignment. So what is the mission of your organization out there? What are the outcomes that you're trying to produce, and how does that align with what the district is trying to do? I think the district, and I'll take ownership for it, we haven't told you all the time what exactly we need and what we're looking for, and where we really need the help. And I think that's something we're getting better at. So how do we align with you to find the best fit and let you know what types of outcomes we're looking for? And then how do we agree on what the instruments are, or the tools of how we're going to know, are we moving the needle and are we getting there? And I think that John's done a lot of deep work with Chris and NIOS to try to get there and figure this out. That way we're all speaking the same language. We all know what we're looking for. We're all goal setting together. And it's not this, let's shoot arrows out into the wilderness and see if we hit something. It just doesn't make sense. So I really appreciate all the work and patience people have had to get that going. And it's a continual improvement, and we're always open for business. And we're always open for feedback as well.
And we're not giving you the alphabet soup of tools and measures we use, but I do want to ask Jen, are we looking at the right things? We're about to get into some sessions that are very specific to program quality and to looking at how you develop these, what I'd say, power skills, these skills that are transferable and portable over life, where we have a good fortune. We have 2 great research and coaching partners in our backyard, NIOS, which is at Wellesley College, and PAIR, which is all over the place. They've been our partners in shaping this work. But tell us from your vantage point, Jen, you see not just Boston programs, but programs around the country. Are we looking at the right things?
Well, there are lots of things that you could look at, right? And I think that the answer is yes, because you're looking at things that relate to the experiences that you're developing for kids, so that you're aligning your programming with your outcomes. So a lot of times that doesn't happen. So I talked about sort of the other districts in social and emotional learning, for instance. And so when we went and we interviewed district leaders in all the districts, they would say, our programs are going to influence social and emotional outcomes. We want kids to be developing those skills. They didn't do anything. There's nothing. And so people question me, well, how did they think that was going to happen? And my answer is kind of glib, but kind of like magic. That just by putting kids around adults that might or might not be nice to them, that good things will happen without doing anything intentional to develop those skills. And so in anything that you do, and there are sort of a host of different types of programs in Boston. And so the ones that we're studying sort of combine these academics and the enrichment, and I know that some other ones you're just focused on enrichment and social emotional learning. And so I think that the biggest lesson is thinking about what do I want to measure, right? So what's important to me? And then going back and thinking, okay, so what am I doing inside my program that's going to lead to those outcomes very intentionally, because they don't happen by magic. They happen through sort of back mapping sort of experiences, training teachers, providing curriculum, and providing certain experiences to kids, or else it won't happen.
Thanks. Yeah, they're not magical, and they're not
No.
invisible either. They're observable.
Yes.
And when I was much younger and 30 pounds lighter, I played basketball, and my father would give me constructive criticism after every game. And of course, it's hard you only hear the criticism, not the constructive. Eric, you've been a part of this for a long time, and we've alluded to some issues. I mean, what's it feel like to be part of a community where everything's measured and shared?
What's it feel like? I'm going to just leave that alone for a second. It's like opening your closet, I guess. You know, I don't know. All the dark shadows and all the things that are in there that you are, you think you've got sort of under control, get brought out on the table, and that's a good thing, because you then really begin to identify little things. I mean, having someone evaluate in depth your arrival time it's good, because arrival time is really important. And then when you realize you don't do it real well for a little while, or something along those lines, the list of all the things that are being looked at really, exposes your areas of weakness. But I think that's it's the only way we get better, and we have to be open-minded to it. We have to be willing to accept the feedback. And then what I think is great is to sit with the other, the small list of organizations you saw earlier on one of the slides that Jim put out, to sit with them and all talk about where our weaknesses are and share what is it the YMCA does that's really well in an area that we're not doing as well, and let's share those best practices. That allows us to get better. And I think doing that in environments where it's a safe group to really talk about that stuff is how you get better at what you're doing. And those are important. That's an important process. And I think keeping it somewhat controlled, and information doesn't just go everywhere about every individual group, has been important. But it gives us then that opportunity to say, okay, how do we look at this and improve on those areas and know the spots where we're weak.
Mm-hmm. The inventory of our collective closet is called the Prism, and it's in your folder. You'll see exactly what's actually measured. Eric alluded to some of the things, but they're in your folder here. All right, so I want to pick up an issue. Kristin said something that really surprised me to think about, but it's true. 5 weeks is only 25 days. Here we are in February planning those 25 days. I know Eric plans every hour in those 25 days. But everyone to a person has said, what would it look like if we applied lessons from summer to the school year? And I know the Wallace Foundation and RAND have raised those questions too. So I'd like everyone on the panel to talk about what that looks like when you apply what we know works in summer to the challenges of the school year. And Jen, can I start with you?
Sure. I think one of the biggest findings of the study are not listed in the report, and that is summer problems are school year problems. And so almost to a T, everything that we've identified across the 4 years in terms of program implementation, in terms of thinking about student attendance where there are struggles, in terms of student to teacher interactions, all of those things that manifest during the summer apply to the school year as well. And I think that I would encourage the school year to be as intentional as Eric is in planning his 25 days. Because I think often we're not as intentional during the school year as we could be. And I say that based on sort of my prior studies of school year and probably even my own kids' experiences in the school year and observing them. How can we sort of hone in on what's really important? And I think that I mean, we may end up seeing changes in terms of how we're measuring accountability in schools eventually, which are going to provide some opportunities for transforming that space. And it may be an opportunity for the school year to look at some of what's been done in terms of the intentionality of summer and to be able to apply those lessons. But it's been really interesting. So the districts that I showed on the attendance slide that struggled with attendance, Rochester and Pittsburgh, guess who has attendance problems during the school year? Rochester and Pittsburgh. So what we see during the summer is often just a manifestation of what we see during the school year.
To echo some of what Jen just talked about is, I think, how do we most efficiently use our time? When we were going through the formative years with RAND, we got a lot of feedback. They essentially did, I guess, mini time audits, and we've done those in the school year with expanded learning time schools. And I think that's something that schools struggle with, is how do you make the most efficient use of time? How do you have time on task? So that's something we still struggle with, scheduling. So that's something we think about, and it was very much the same I think in the formative years, and continues to be to some perspective, scheduling summer. The big headline from the academic, and again, being patient, not taking it as a silver bullet, we have issues with English language arts. We just do. It's very complex. I think lots of districts struggle with that. How do you get children to read? How do you get them to comprehend and make connections to themselves in the world and what they're reading, and then make meaning of it and use of it? And we're having a really hard time with that. And summer is just one little window of time. So how do we use those 25 days? How do we use that time to inform what we're doing with students in the school year? So ELA is a struggle for us. I think the other thing that summer has told us is that enrichment and experience matters so much. And I really think that that was one of the causes for our great attendance and persistence of students. And I worked very hard to put that in the heads of lots of principals in the schools I go to, is that engagement and enrichment matters. I think sometimes we get so caught up in trying to get ready for MCAS or now PARC that we forget that kids may not even want to come to school because of that, and it's so much focus and intensity on the academics. So how do we purposely bring in this time? And it can be time that academics is, embedded within the experience or the enrichment, but we need to really plan that into the school day. And a huge part of that is having partners come in. I mean, if we're not doing it well and it's not appealing to students, let's bring partners in and have you help us with that. So those are some of the things for summer that we are trying to push all throughout the school year.
So there are so many different things that you could take from what we've learned in summer and apply to the school year. I think that the first is that partnerships are hard. And because they are hard, if it is going to work well, we actually need to put aside the time to plan for it. I mean, you're right, it's February and we're talking about July and it feels really late for 25 days. So if you think about that in the context of a school year, when is it that we're setting aside time to intentionally plan between schools and partners? I don't see it. Maybe you all do because you live it more than I do, but I don't see the intentional time that is set aside to be thinking about outcomes, to be thinking about curriculum, to be thinking about who's taking the lead on what, to acknowledging that there is someone who might be better taking the lead on some things than other folks, whether that is our school partners or our nonprofit partners, and who's going to lead. Like, I very rarely see those things happen for school year, and they have to happen if we're actually going to utilize our partnerships to their fullest. And so I think that piece and that piece of learning from summer is the transitional work that needs to happen. And you see some of that work in what John Sproul is trying to do at BPS, but it is not as deep as it needs to be. It is not as broad as it needs to be. And we haven't yet landed on which partners work best for which schools. And I think that is a much longer piece of work that's going to take a lot of time. But as we do that work, really looking at what we've learned from summer is going to be critical, because because that otherwise is wasted time, right? Because we've spent so much time thinking about design, thinking about feedback loops, and to not take that and transfer it is really would be a shame. So that's sort of my thought. I think the other thing is the piece that most resonates for me in the summer work. I think back to maybe our third summer when Rand came back and said, you need to use a curriculum. And we were like, what? We don't want to use a curriculum. This is summer. This is supposed to be fun. We're not going to use it. And we argued, and they argued back, and they won. Which actually was fine, because that was what we needed to do. And I think some of us in the nonprofit space are all like, well, you know, those curriculums, those are boring, blah, 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 blah. We needed to actually step back and listen to what Rand was saying to us about what young people needed during that academic piece, because that was the expertise they were bringing to the table. And I think we need to actually sit back and listen to some of our schools about what they need to have happen and the best way that we can be used as nonprofit partners. And conversely, they need to really think about what we can bring to the table and where the leadership is that comes in through the nonprofit space. So I think there's a whole lot of work to be done, and I look forward to us trying to make it happen.
Well, I think when you talk about the difference between, you know, what we can take from this and influence the academic year, the thing that really stands out for me, and this is sort of ends up being a little bit of my soapbox, but it's the social emotional side of things, and that kids need to know how to navigate socially. And I think most of us sitting in this room know that our ability to work with other people is one of the most important skills we have to further ourselves and our success. And when we take a kid who's in 3rd or 4th grade and quickly in our minds make them 27 years old and succeeding and being successful contributors in our society, a lot of it has to do with their social emotional ability to be a part of a community and successfully part of a community. And I think that is something that we find is working in these summer programs. We're able to do that in these small networks where they're having some really unique and fun experiences that kids just grab a hold of, and they're allowed to explore some of their own the components of learning that really excite them. I think that's one of the best pieces we can take from the summer and try to help to continue to influence in the school year, and how do we make that happen.
Great. I want to turn back to the audience. Are there any questions percolating, any comments on the research, on the panelists' reaction to the research, any of your own reactions that you'd like to share? If you do, raise your hand really high so I can see it. I'm happy to call them out. We have a few more minutes left.
Just a quick question. I raise this often when I have the opportunity to do so. The state has the Mass Work-Based Learning Plan, which is a huge database that's been going on for a number of years, that has been consistent about summer programs, mainly job readiness programs, but it's well connected to employability, and I'm wondering, what are we considering in this smaller group how to connect to that database and make that part of our way of evaluating whether we're successful in the macro sense.
Now, let me just repeat that so everyone can hear. So Alan asked, the Massachusetts Work-Based Learning Plan, which is a set of work-ready competencies where supervisors are evaluating student employees at the beginning and the end of the summer program. There's now a big database with presumably tens of thousands of kids. What are we doing to look at that data and to collect it with the data we're looking at? Now, I'm not sure any of you is familiar with the Work-Based Learning Plan. Let me take a shot. We do. We use different valid and reliable instruments, and we're somewhat agnostic about that. What we use, now we'll get into alphabet soup, the SEO from NIOS. That looks at a similar set of skills as the Work-Based Learning Plan, and I would leave it to the researchers to see if there's an opportunity to collect data, to synthesize data that's been collected through different instruments. But at the end of the day, we're having a more deliberate focus on a few set of skills that subsume most of the rest. Self-management, critical thinking, collaboration, and perseverance. Recognizing that they get measured in slightly different ways with slightly different tools from slightly different perspectives. But I think that's an excellent idea. Keep saying that. And it's an area we should pursue.
Can I just say one thing on that? And it's related but different. For our high school space and even our middle school space, We are thinking much more intentionally about how to use summer for experience, for work, but for also college credit. So I don't think we have been as intentional, but it's moving. And I think there's such an emphasis on high school redesign right now and thinking around our high school strategy, and summer is absolutely at the table. We've had great partnerships with the PIC. We've done a lot of work within English, and we have a new level 4 coming on board that is a high school. Summer is a huge component of that, and coaching and workplace and experience is just critical in this new model we're taking on for this school. So it's not lost on us. We're catching up, and we're just trying to do it well and be very intentional. We desperately need partners in our high schools that are going to help us figure this out, and using summer as that time. Summer is also so important to hold kids so they do not drop out, so that they come back. So I really thank you for that, but it's something we definitely need to pay more attention to.
Are you tracking individual child outcomes over time? So you go back to 2011. So do you know if individual kids are returning, A, and B, how they're doing? Do you have that kind of?
So the question is, are we tracking outcomes at the individual student level?
Yeah.
I can speak to that. Actually, Ariana, I have to give you a major shout out for this, because Ariana did the deep legwork of getting into our technology department and making sure that we have new systems in our student information to flag students of what program they're going to, so we can follow them over time. It's 2015. We were not doing this before. This really started last summer, was our kind of maiden voyage on this. And it was an undertaking to think, oh wow, wouldn't a school want to know if your student went to a summer program? And then how do we follow this? So this record or portfolio of participation will go with the student. So mad props to Ariana, because we have to do this. We totally revamped how teachers and principals were selecting programs for individual students, and now it's being flagged so we always know what the student has participated in, how many years, what the grades were that came out of the program, if it assigns grades. So this is what we're tracking. So we're working on it, but it was a maiden voyage for us.
We have a question down in front.
I think it's great that you guys are finally doing that. It's been some of our partners' frustration going to the same high school with 5 or 6 different outside programs that go into this high school, and if a high school principal doesn't have someone who coordinate all that, we're bumping into each other, but also serving sometimes the same students. So I think the other piece I have a question about is data sharing. Our programs, so there's a bunch of TRIO programs within Massachusetts, but also within the Boston area, and I think the TRIO folks are being very intentional about making sure that we're not going into the same high school when we do our grant over, that we're being selective of the high school that we want to work with. But also, I think, the whole idea of a student might be in my program and then they transfer to a different program. As a program, we still need to track the students. I think even if at a district level, we're able to access and be able to advise our student better with their academic needs and outcome based on what their quarterly grades look like, and not wait until the end of the year. By then it'd be too late, especially for those programs that do have tutoring services available.
Okay, so the question is, how can data sharing among this array of nonprofit partners in the district enhance partnerships so that there is the sharing on both sides, if the partner knows how the young person's doing in school and vice versa? Right.
Sorry, it's me again. So we do not have a standardized way. We do not. And we need to have better information go to you, absolutely. I think personally what I found through Summer Learning Project is, how do I get IEPs to sites so they know, oh, by the way, the student has autism and probably shouldn't be running through salt marshes on Thompson Island because they don't like the feel of that and they're going to flip out. I know that's like a crazy example, but maybe we should direct that student to a different program that has indoor space. Things like that. We don't have a standardized way of sharing that kind of fine-grained information, and we need to, and it's a work in progress. I don't want to speak out of turn or make promises because Kamal Shabda will absolutely kill me, but I do believe that things are in the works, and we are trying to be better partners on sharing information with students. We do bump up against confidentiality, and I know that we're working around that, so non-disclosures are really important. We can't just open up our SIS to anyone, unfortunately, so it takes time to, how do we give you access to groups of students? I don't want to bore you with all of this, but we get it, and we are there with you. We are working on it. We just don't have standardized way right now, and I don't know, Chris, if you have some better information.
Yeah, I would say one interest in data sharing has always come up as an obstacle, and we've tried to take it on directly and failed many times. Through this project, we've backed into what we should collect and why in collecting it securely. And so this is a step toward a solution. It's not the solution. But we've adopted a database called youthservices.net, which you'll hear about later. The fields reflect the work that's happening in summer learning over time. We're working with the district to make sure there's a connection there that's not manual but digital and through technology. That doesn't solve your very precise question, which is, I have consents, therefore I have access to the data, how do I get it? I think that's a workflow issue that has yet to be solved, but I think adding to Melissa's comments, we're taking steps to get to that point. And on that point too, that we do have a model consent form. If you want to see what's being used in the project that's been referenced, that is the best way to ensure that you can access student data over time, is to get their parents' consent to do so. It's more secure than any other way. It takes a lot of legwork, I realize. We have time for one more question, then we're going to move to the sessions.
As we're talking about large-scale impact, I'm wondering about beyond the summer and the impact of the coaching and the teacher consistency in the summer on the academic year, and if there's any data about instructional quality improvements throughout the year based on the summer.
I'll take that. So, you raise a really interesting question. I think is an open research question at this point, and one that I think is like sort of on my next agenda of things that I'd like to study. So all of these programs have drawn teachers from the districts, and so in Boston there are attempts to draw from feeder schools so that there are some familiar faces to at least some of the students. But in reality, not every kid in a classroom will have had that teacher or will be going into the grade level of that teacher, even when they're sort of the most perfect match in terms of those types of things because of the feeder nature of the system. And so one real question I think that we have to think about is, are programs that are more linked to schools and are smaller in some kind of way, right, more effective? Are those schools able to capitalize on the learning made by kids during the summer in ways that other schools are not? And that is an open research question at this point. The only thing, the research that has been done in the past, sort of that has this teacher link, it's actually done in mandatory programs in Chicago, where the researchers there found that kids who continued with their same school year teacher actually had better outcomes than the kids who were assigned a different teacher. There's something about that consistency, teachers knowing the student, being able to hit the ground running from day one. But in the reality, a lot of these programs, teachers show up, and you might know a few kids, like if you're lucky, you know 5 kids in your class, and sometimes they might all be new. And for a lot of these programs, they have a very diverse range of kids in terms of ability levels in the classroom, and teachers have to figure that out during the first week or so, and they're 25 days. And so there is some kind of sort of like inefficiency there. And then there's also inefficiency on the drop-off back into the school year. So that teacher from the summer knows something about the kids now in their classroom. I know that Eric now is writing excellent paragraphs. Like his writing skills have improved dramatically. But I don't necessarily have a way to feed that back to Eric's next year's teacher. And so this idea of feedback into the system is one that's really challenging. It's been challenging across all of the districts. And I think is an open question as to whether things could be more effective if we were able to tighten those things up.
And I just want to call it, thank you for the questions. Alan's question on high school competencies, how are we measuring them, how are we tracking them? The question on data sharing as a way to enhance partnerships, and the question on how we track teacher practice over time. This is exactly the kind of feedback we need for the Insight Center it's not just what we know, but it's also what we don't know and need to explore. And so that's great modeling. Unfortunately, those three have to be the only three questions. I have to play timekeeper. But let me close this panel by thanking you all very much for your comments.